system asked me to redeem Ken, but 10 years of relationship can't compare to one call from his lost love. Heartbroken, I left the pregnancy test result and flew abroad. As soon as I got off the plane, Ken bombarded me with messages. The bar notified me that a pregnancy test result was left in the room. Molly, you're pregnant. I've always been careful. How can you be pregnant? Is this pregnancy test result supposed to be my birthday gift? Molly, answer me. Last night, I really had something to do. Wendy came back and couldn't get a cab, so I went to pick her up. That's all. Molly, I went to your house. You weren't there. Where did you go? Stop messing around, please. Molly, answer me. I'm begging you. Along with the messages, my period arrived. Oh, I'm not pregnant. Ken's birthday was today. I planned to surprise him. That pregnancy test result that had been in my bag all day was now crumpled from my constant fidgeting. Finally, at 1 a.m., everyone who'd come to celebrate had left. The large room was now just me, him, and a bunch of empty bottles. Ken had drunk quite a bit, his face slightly flushed, looking more alluring than usual. I stood up and walked over to him. He pulled me into a kiss, rough and urgent. I had to push against his chest with my elbow to catch my breath. Ken, stop. His eyes were restless with desire. When he heard me, he held my face, his voice hoarse. Are you upset today? You haven't had a single drink. I shook my head, looking at him seriously. From now on, I can't drink, and neither can you. And you can't smoke anymore either. Ken chuckled. Why are you being so strict all of a sudden? He affectionately pinched my cheek. I couldn't help but smile. Ken, it's your birthday today. I haven't given you your birthday present yet. Ken leaned back, lounging on the sofa, watching me intently. So you didn't forget after all. I got off his lap. Wait for me. I rushed back to my seat, and took out the crumpled pregnancy test result from my bag, my heart racing. We've been together for 3 years, but has never made our relationship public. Countless times in our intimacy, I suggested going public. Ken always analyzed calmly. Legally, we're uncle and niece, even though I'm adopted. My father is old and traditional. He wouldn't accept this kind of relationship. Ethan sees me as a brother. How can I do this to him? Besides, you're still young. Every time, I interrupted him. If you had so many concerns, why were you with me in the first place? Ken's eyes deepened. Because love is uncontrollable. Because you kept coming back. Because I love you, Molly. So, in public, we were distant uncle and niece. But in private, we shared all kinds of intimacy. And now, I was pregnant. I couldn't believe Ken would be cruel enough to make me abort this baby. Though going public would bring a storm, at least we could be open about our relationship. Holding the thin pregnancy test result, I turned around. Ken's phone rang. The ringtone was different from usual, clearly set for someone specific. He had been watching me with lazy tenderness, but as soon as the ringtone sounded, his expression turned anxious and his posture straightened. A wild thought burst into my mind. Ken answered, his voice trembling. Hello. My heart clenched, feeling an uncontrollable sense of foreboding. Ken, look. I couldn't wait to hand him the pregnancy test result, but he shot me a warning glance. The rest of my words got stuck in my throat. He looked like he was facing a major crisis, cautious and tense. Okay, I understand. I'll be there soon. Ken grabbed his jacket hastily, accidentally knocking the test result from my hand. The ultrasound image spread open. One glance, and he would know I was pregnant. But he didn't look. Ken hung up, his expression a mix of excitement and worry. Seeing my pale face, he seemed to realize I was still there. He stepped closer, hugged me briefly, and spoke urgently. I have an emergency to attend to. Can you drive home since you haven't drunk? I looked down at the pregnancy test result under his foot, dazed. Where are you going? Sweetie, I have an emergency. Ken patted my hair and quickly left. The door closed with a loud bang, showing how urgent he was. I knew who he was going to see, but I wasn't ready to give up. I didn't believe our years of relationship meant less than a single call from that person. I ran out the door after him. Just outside, I saw Ken's car speeding away. I hurried to my car and followed. Ken stopped near the airport. On the roadside stood a woman and a small child. The woman had long hair, a gentle face, and held the hand of a 3 or 4-year-old girl, cute and delicate. She was Ken's lost love, Wendy, and the child was her daughter with her ex-husband. Ken got out of the car, his steps going from hesitant to quick. He stopped in front of Wendy and hugged her tightly. You're finally back. Wendy smiled a helpless smile, patting his back gently. Long time no see, Ken. The little girl next to her piped up. Uncle Ken, I missed you. My heart dropped at her words. So, they had always been in contact. Ken, seeming to realize he was acting out, let go of Wendy. Wendy asked, I heard Molly's voice on the phone earlier. Won't she mind you suddenly coming here? Ken quickly explained. She won't mind. She's just my niece. Wendy tilted her head with a knowing smile, clearly skeptical. Ken insisted. Molly is just my niece. There's nothing between us. All right, I believe you. Looking at the three people not far away, I couldn't tell if I was more angry or more sad. Instinctively, I clutched my chest, trying to suppress the sharp pain. So, this was the real reason Ken never wanted to go public. He never forgot Wendy. Then what am I? What about everything I've done all these years? Watching them reminisce like a family, my destructive urges started to rise. So, I made a call. Hello. I'd like to report someone driving under the influence on West Ring Road. Screw this tragic anti-hero, I'm done. Actually, I came from a book. The system gave me a mission to redeem these tragic anti-heroes who wanted to destroy the world. Ken was my first task. I could only return to my world if I succeeded. If I failed, I'd be stuck here forever. When I first arrived, I walked into a scene where Ken was being beaten nearly to death for offending the male lead. I saved him. To keep him away from the main characters, I begged my father to adopt him, but he refused. He said Ken looked like a loser who'd turn ungrateful. Eventually, my grandfather adopted Ken by chance, and he became my Ken. During that time at the old mansion, I did everything I could to accept and redeem him, transforming him from a gloomy boy into a sunny young man. Now, he's a hotshot in the business world with a bright future. He has no ties with the main characters. I thought I had succeeded, but somewhere along the way, I also fell in love with Ken. I tried my best to win him over and started a secret relationship with him. I even thought about marrying him and having kids, forgetting my mission. After 10 years of silence, the system suddenly reappeared. Host, the redemption journey is at a critical point. If you can make Ken unconditionally love you, the mission will be complete. Host, sirens blared around me. I took one last look at Ken, surrounded by traffic cops, and drove away. Host, the system understands your pain, but the mission must continue. Don't you want to go back? I sniffled. I've always backed down from tough situations. 10 years of feelings overshadowed by a call from the female lead. Why torture myself any further? Besides, staying here is pretty good. I have Molly, endless money, no worries about my future. It's much better than going back to grind for a living. The system was silent. Host, you're pretty open-minded. Thanks for the compliment. The mission isn't mandatory. You don't need to show up anymore. Okay. The system went quiet, and I went back to my apartment. Acting like nothing happened, I scheduled an abortion, cleaned up, and went to bed. But I kept thinking about Ken, unable to sleep. I jolted up. Ken, screw you. I cried my heart out. Afterward, I decided that after the abortion, I'd find several cute guys to comfort my wounded heart. The next day, I went to the hospital, eyes swollen, ready for the procedure. But just before I went under, the doctor burst in. Miss Molly, you're not pregnant. Why are you getting an abortion? What? Turns out there were 2 Mollys that day, and I took the wrong test results. I was immensely relieved. Back home, I sensed something was off. Dad and Mom were on the couch, looking like they were about to interrogate me. Nervously, I sat down. Dad, Mom. Dad scoffed. Yesterday, you celebrated your uncle's birthday with him. What happened? How did he get arrested for DUI? How embarrassing. Mom looked disappointed. It's all over the news, hurting the company's reputation. Usually, he seems reliable. How could he be so reckless? So it was about that. I put on an innocent face. I don't know. He grabbed his coat and left. I couldn't stop him. Dad, will Ken be detained? Dad glared at me. No accident, just license suspension and a fine. Anyway, I've arranged for you to go abroad. The paperwork is done. Pack up and leave today. You need a change, and stop following Ken around all the time. He's your uncle. The last sentence hit hard, with a different meaning. My heart skipped a beat. Okay, Dad, I'll listen. Seeing my compliance, Dad softened a bit. Go pack. I hurried upstairs, feeling relieved. I had tried hard to go public, doing things like rubbing Ken's leg under the dinner table, or kissing him behind closed doors. Dad must have noticed and rushed to send me abroad. Before the flight, Dad texted me that Ethan was abroad too and would pick me up. Refusing was not an option. My relationship with Ethan was awkward. When I got here at 13, he teased me until I tamed him. In high school, I spent all my free time chasing Ken to redeem him. Ethan followed me around, cleaning up my messes tirelessly. Rumors of a love triangle spread, and Mom talked to me about it. I assured her multiple times that I didn't like Ken, who was 7 years older, and she let it go. Ethan's family found it too humiliating, fearing more scandals, so they sent him abroad. The night before he left, Ethan sneaked into my house, asking if I'd go with him. But Ken was sick and calling my name in his sleep, so I quickly declined and went to care for Ken. After that, we lost touch. It was only later that I realized Ethan likely had feelings for me. Meeting him now felt weird. Due to the time difference, it was still daylight when I landed, but I was exhausted. I looked for Ethan, but he was nowhere in sight. I stepped outside the airport and was just about to call him when my phone buzzed first. Seeing the name on it jolted me awake. Ken. It was a call from Ken. As the network connected, heaps of Ken's Instagram notifications flooded in. The bar told me there's a pregnancy test left in the booth. Molly, you're pregnant. I've always been careful. How could you be pregnant? Is this pregnancy test my birthday gift from you? Molly, answer me. I was truly busy last night. Wendy came back and couldn't get a cab, so I just went to pick her up. Molly, I went to your place to find you, but you weren't home. Where did you go? Please stop this. Answer me, I'm begging you. Squinting, I dismissed all the notifications one by one. Just as I found Ethan's number, a hand in a white glove swiftly snatched my phone. I was immediately shocked awake, clutching my bag tight, and turning around quickly. Two thieves on motorcycles sped off into the distance. My phone. I wanted to chase them, but couldn't leave my luggage behind. But without a phone, I couldn't contact Ethan. I was frantic. Molly, someone called from behind. I turned around to see Ethan stopping his car in front of me. We hadn't seen each other in years. He looked more mature and serious now. I quickly said, my phone got stolen, they went that way. Get in. I thought Ethan was going to help me catch the thieves, but instead, he turned in the opposite direction. What? We're not chasing them, Ethan explained. There have been a lot of robberies recently. The robbers have guns. It's not safe to follow them. But my phone, I'll get you a new one. He glanced at me and I obediently nodded. Not familiar with this place, it was best to follow his lead. After getting a new phone and SIM card, I called home to let them know I was safe. I hesitated a bit before saying, don't tell Ken about this. My mom didn't ask why, just agreed. Ethan glanced at me but said nothing. After he took me back to his apartment, he pointed out my room and then went to his, acting extremely distant. I was tired and didn't have the energy for small talk, so I went to my room and passed out. When I woke, it was from pain. My lower abdomen hurt. My delayed period had arrived. Searching around, I found no pads in the room, and I didn't want to go out. So I called Ethan. He was the only person I knew here. However, Ethan's line was busy. Left with no choice, I changed clothes and wobbled to his door, leaning against the wall for support. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard him muttering inside. Yeah, Molly likes spicy and sweet food, enjoys hot pot, seafood. She likes anything tasty. Any dietary restrictions? Nope. Don't worry, Auntie. I will take good care of her. Oh, and Auntie, I heard Molly hasn't dated anyone all these years after she broke up. Before that, her uncle. Oh, they were just uncle and niece. I misunderstood, Auntie. That's good then. It's getting dark here. Molly should wake up soon. I'll cook for her, Auntie. Goodbye, Auntie. Only when I heard goodbye did I realize Ethan was talking to my mom. They had been on the phone for 2 hours while I slept. I knocked on the door. Ethan jumped slightly and turned around quickly. Seeing my pale face and sweat-covered forehead, his guilty expression turned to concern. He rushed over. What's wrong with you? Is it food poisoning or a cold? The hospitals here are slow. I have medicine at home. Hold on, I'll find some for you. I weakly grabbed his shirt. He stopped and looked at me, worried. It's my period. Please get me some sanitary pads. Thank you. Are you sure you're okay? Do you need any medicine? I shook my head. I'm really hungry, Ethan. I looked at him pitifully. All this sweating is because I'm starving. I hadn't eaten much since Ken's birthday. Wait here. Ethan handed me a piece of bread and rushed out to buy the pads and stuff. Half an hour later, lying in bed, I finally felt a bit better. Ethan was no longer cold. He flustered around taking care of me. An hour later, he had cooked a delicious meal. At the table, I asked Ethan, what did you and my mom talk about? Ethan's face stiffened. Nothing much, just chatted. I asked again, weren't you cold to me at first? Ethan paused and turned his head uncomfortably. Can't I be mad? I sighed. Ethan, I just broke up. He looked down. Yeah, I figured. He then looked at me seriously. If you weren't trying to escape a breakup, you'd never obediently go abroad. My ex is Ken, my uncle. He nodded. I know. Ethan's calm reaction made me feel a bit at a loss. So, don't fall for me. Who would have thought Ethan would laugh at that? Just because I'm nice doesn't mean I like you. Your dad asked me to look out for you. Don't be so full of yourself. I didn't buy it. If he was only looking out for me, Why call my mom and ask about all my preferences? Ethan turned away. Believe what you want. Suddenly, my mind was pierced by System's sharp alarm. Host, the target of redemption is starting to blacken. That sharp sound made my ears buzz. Instinctively, I covered them. What's going on? Darkening. The System urgently added. System detects that Ken couldn't find you, and after discovering you had contacted the hospital, he's gone mad and is about to darken. You've worked so hard for so long. Are you really going to give up on Ken now? With Ethan around, I couldn't respond to the System. I was looking for an excuse to go back to my room, when Ethan suddenly grabbed my hand. He looked at me with sincere eyes and said each word firmly. That's right, Molly, I still like you. The System chimed in simultaneously. Host, Ken still likes you. How about we give it another shot? Ethan continued. Actually, I think Ken is very irresponsible. He's 7 years older than you. If you don't understand things, he should. Host, redemption is only one step away. Haven't you made it through these 10 years? If he couldn't handle the consequences of going public, he shouldn't have been with you in the first place. Sneaking around like this, what does he take you for? Host, successful redemption means you can return to the real world, and there are generous rewards too. Molly, get a grip. The fastest way to get over breakup is to start a new relationship. I wouldn't treat you like that. What do you think, Host? They were both talking so fast, my single-core brain couldn't keep up. Then they both suddenly went quiet, waiting for my answer. I nodded non-committally. I'll think about it. Instantly, Ethan's eyes lit up. Great. Seeing his expression, I realized I might have said the wrong thing. I'm not feeling well. I'm going to rest. I rushed back to my room. Wait, what did Ethan just say? I asked the System. He said he wants to pursue you, it replied. And what did you say? I questioned. I said, successful redemption has generous rewards. Do you want to consider it? The System explained. I immediately shook my head. No. Why? You didn't even ask what the reward is. What if it's something you need? Still shaking my head. I'm satisfied with my current life. It doesn't matter if I return to the real world or not. The System persisted, but I cut it off. You're just a bunch of data. You don't understand feelings. When it's time to cut something off, you should. Otherwise, you'll get hurt. For these 10 years, I've given my all to Ken. After everything, he only said I'm just his niece. The System remained silent for a long time. Lying there, looking at the ceiling, I sincerely said, I can feel that Ken loves me, but it's clear the heroine is more important to him, even after 10 years apart. I don't know if it's the set plot or character design, but I don't want to fight unknown forces and end up a mess. One Ken isn't enough to make me do that. I love him, but I love myself more. Alright, Host, I understand, the System finally said. I closed my eyes, trying to fall asleep, thinking about future plans. I couldn't keep living with Ethan. It wasn't good for either of us. I needed to clarify what I said earlier. The more I thought about it, the harder it was to sleep. So, I took out my phone and searched for rental listings overnight. Finally, before sleep overcame me, I found a satisfactory place. After noting down the contact info, I fell asleep contentedly. The next morning, when I contacted the landlord, Ethan overheard. He seemed surprised, but quickly returned to normal. If you need help, just let me know. I wanted to explain what I said last night, but his natural reaction threw me off. I just nodded. After breakfast, Ethan insisted on accompanying me to see the apartment. Have you forgotten about that time you got mugged right after getting off the plane? With me around, it's safer. He leaned against the door frame, hands in pockets, clearly determined not to let me go alone. I finally relented. All right. Ethan smiled and opened the door wide with a flourish. After you, my lady. I froze for a moment. In high school, people used to say he was my little sidekick, because he often followed me around. He didn't deny it. Instead, he cheerfully called me my lady, over and over until my face turned red. Now, I felt my ears grow warm. I glared at him. Be serious. He smiled nonchalantly. Okay, my lady. Not looking at him, I hurried out the door. Viewing the apartment went smoothly, and I agreed to rent it on the spot with the landlord. I didn't have much stuff, so it wouldn't take long to move. But while I was packing my clothes, Ethan was busy cleaning the whole apartment. When I came out, I saw him, shirtless, wringing a cloth. His arm muscles were tense and defined. What are you doing? Ethan turned around, his 8-pack abs gleaming in the light. Cleaning. It looked clean, but who knows what the previous tenant did. I hastily turned away, stammering, I know you're cleaning, but why? I pointed to the shirt tossed on the couch. Why'd you take off your shirt? Ethan chuckled. My shirt's white, and I have plans later. Can't get it dirty. I murmured shyly. Then why not find an apron? I couldn't find one. Can you help me look? Grateful for the distraction, I quickly searched for an apron. After calming down a bit, I found an unused white apron in the closet. I shook it out. Here. Ethan glanced back, then at me, his ears turning red. Where'd you find it? Found it in the closet. Relax, it's unused, I said, confused. Ethan lowered his head, murmuring, oh, I see. Then, he opened his arms. Help me put it on. My hands are dirty. I frowned, hesitating, but he was cleaning for me. All right, bend down. Ethan squatted down slightly, his eyes full of amusement. I straightened the apron and exclaimed, why are there frills? Row after row of frilly edges. When I finally tied the apron around him, I froze for 2 seconds. White, made, apron, bare-chested, muscles, man. I was petrified. Ethan's voice was low. Help me tie it up. I took 2 steps back, pulling off the apron, stammering, no, this. But Ethan, with a raised eyebrow and a smile on his lips, looked at me leisurely. He knew what it was. Annoyed, I stomped my foot. Ethan, can you be serious for once? Ethan looked innocent. How am I not serious? Didn't you give this to me? You. Unable to win the argument, I turned around and walked off, both embarrassed and annoyed. I've never seen a man in a maid outfit before, otherwise I would have known what it was. So, Ethan cleaned the kitchen, and I went to tidy the living room. Ethan cleaned the bathroom, and I went to make the bed in the bedroom. In short, I wouldn't stay in the same space as him. Once everything was organized, he walked off nonchalantly, making my awkwardness seem so childish and laughable. I thought after moving here, I could naturally distance myself from Ethan, but to my surprise, he came over every day without fail to cook and do laundry for me, reminding me of various things to watch out for. When asked, he said my parents had asked him to take care of me. At first, I firmly refused. It's just cooking, I can do it too, even if it's not very good. But I didn't expect the meat abroad to be different from home. After being forced to eat bread for 2 days, I gave in. When Ethan offered to come over to cook, I didn't refuse. But some things still needed to be clarified. Ethan, does this mean you're courting me? I leaned against the kitchen door, watching the busy Ethan. He took a moment to glance back at me. Isn't it obvious? Which lady is worth me doing all this for? Hearing this, I scratched my head. I'm not planning to date right now. Ethan put down the knife, turned around, and with a smile on his lips said, whether you want to date is your business. Whether I can make you want to, that's up to me. You watch less TV dramas. So our relationship stayed in this delicate balance for a while. I've gotten used to Ethan's presence, and being around him doesn't feel awkward anymore. During this time, I made a new friend named Julia. When she found out I came here after a breakup, she insisted on taking me to the biggest bar to find the hottest model. Coincidentally, Ethan had some errands to run today, and didn't come over. So, we both dressed in sizzling outfits, and headed out excitedly. In the dim, alluring lights, Julia pointed at a man in a black and white maid outfit, screaming for me to choose him. She meant to say, nice looking, useful, and cheap. I quickly waved my hand to decline. It's one thing to look, but I had no intention of getting involved. Just as I was looking around, a hand suddenly covered my eyes. Ethan's gritted voice sounded in my ear. Impressive. I'm gone for 1 day, and you're in a place like this. Molly, do you really think this place is as safe as back home? If it were, why would I come find you every day? Ethan's sudden appearance took me by surprise. He wasn't his usual gentle self. In both tone and demeanor, he seemed angry and forceful. I tried to pull his hand away, but couldn't. Instead, he wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me back effortlessly and carrying me away. Come on, can't we talk this out? Ethan took me to the hallway before putting me down, his face still unsettled. Now tell me, why did you come here? Want to see that stuff? Just say so, I'll wear it for you. I was stunned by his outburst. What do you mean? You came here too. How is that the same? What's the difference? I glared at him, craning my neck. He glared right back, lowering his head. At that moment, a group of drunken men stumbled out of the bar. Ethan immediately placed himself in front of me, his expression darkening. One of the drunk men bumped into Ethan, causing him to step forward. Right then, I had my head tilted back. He had to look up to avoid it, but he didn't. Or maybe he did, because my lips touched his Adam's apple. Ethan froze, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. The veins on his arm bulged, and his expression turned visibly anxious and flustered. My mind went blank too. I tried to back away, but there was a wall behind me, nowhere to go. This awkward posture lasted for several seconds until the drunk men left. Ethan silently pulled me out of the bar. Behind us, the loud, bustling bar suddenly quieted down after a few gunshots, followed by sharp screams. Startled, I turned around, but Ethan quickly shoved me into the car. Did you see that? Ethan's face was calm, his tone unhappy. This time, I didn't dare talk back, nodding obediently. Ethan glanced at me, started the car, and drove off. In the car, neither of us spoke. The atmosphere grew awkward, until a ringtone broke the eerie silence. I answered the phone. Mom. From the other end, my mom's anxious voice spoke. I just got word that Ken is coming to find you. He's gained some influence over the years. It's not hard for him to track you down. This time he's making an excuse of business to get to you and plans to bring you back. Be careful. Her tone suggested she knew about Ken and me. As much as I thought I'd hidden it well, turns out they knew all along. Mom, are you mad? If you are, then I'll stay abroad for a few more years. Mom gave a little snort. Do you think I should be mad? All these years, if I hadn't covered for you, your dad would have found out long ago. With his temper, do you think he'd tolerate you and Ken messing around? I bit my lip. I'm sorry, Mom. My mom was silent for a while before she said, you're an adult now. Mom won't control your decisions. As long as you don't bring shame to the family, I'll turn a blind eye. This time, it's because of the pregnancy scare and the surgery that your dad was anxious to send you abroad. He was worried something uncontrollable might happen later. Thankfully, you were obedient. I quickly explained. I wasn't pregnant. It was a mistake with the test results. I know. Your dad knows too. Otherwise, do you think sending you abroad would be that simple? Anyway, Ken's been seeing another woman lately. He's been treating her daughter like his own. In the future, be more careful when choosing a man, okay? I nodded repeatedly. I understand, Mom. Thank you, Mom. I love you. After hanging up the phone, I breathed a sigh of relief, but then started worrying again. The system had warned that Ken could turn dangerous, and now he's looking for me. Would he do something drastic? I was a little scared. Finally scared now. Ethan said coolly from beside me. I glanced at him. I haven't asked you yet. Why were you in that bar? And why was there a shooting? I know it's not safe there, but I didn't expect it to be that dangerous, I said. Ethan, driving, replied. Remember those two guys who stole your phone? Today was about catching them. They killed someone during a robbery. I have a friend in the police department who asked me to help lure them in. The bar is owned by a high-up, and no guns are allowed inside, so it's safer to catch them there. And those gunshots earlier, resisting arrest, got shot on the spot, Ethan said. My heart pounded, feeling a wave of fear. Seeing my reaction, Ethan used one hand to ruffle my hair. Don't go to places like that anymore. If you need to vent after a breakup, I can help, he said, not daring to look at me, his face flushing. I quickly pushed his hand away. No need for venting. Feeling awkward, I turned to look out the window and realized this wasn't the way to my place. Where are we going? Ethan replied, my place. Half an hour later, we arrived at Ethan's home. He worried Ken might come looking for me and thought it was safer for me to stay over. Ethan brought over 2 bottles of beer and sat across from me. Can you tell me about you and Ken? He asked. Avoiding his gaze, I took a sip of beer. Didn't my mom tell you everything? But I want to hear it from you. Molly, what do you like about him? Ethan's eyes were intense, focused on me. Feeling awkward, I said. Stop grilling me like this. Ethan remained silent, just staring at me for a long time. Under his gaze, I felt uncomfortable and drank more to distract myself. Before I knew it, my bottle was empty. I can hold my liquor, but my face gets red easily. No surprise my cheeks were probably flushed by now. Thinking I was drunk, Ethan's expression turned slightly mischievous. I pointed at him. Don't think getting me drunk will lead to something. He chuckled. Do you think I'm that kind of jerk? Saying that, he stood and went to his room. Sitting at the table, I rested my chin on my hand, seriously considering Ethan's question. What did I like about Ken? He had all the traits of a tragic antihero, a miserable backstory, intelligence, sensitivity, and was deeply loyal. His looks and physique were flawless. After receiving enough love, his gloomy and obsessive nature matured, becoming reliable and self-sufficient. How could I not fall for someone nearly perfect? Someone I spent so much time with and had such strong ties to. But I had never met the true female lead. I never knew Ken's deep loyalty wasn't meant for me. I was deluding myself about his feelings. I naively believed that since I had redeemed him, he should be hopelessly in love with me. Sighing, I continued drinking. Ethan finally emerged from the room after a good 10 minutes. Molly, I looked up, almost dropping my bottle as I stared at him. He had changed into a black and white maid outfit, his muscles barely contained by the thin fabric, with a laced apron and wolf ears headband. He even wore a collar with a bell that jingled. The visual impact was overwhelming. Is this what he picked up from being overseas? Ethan, clearly uncomfortable under my gaze, coughed a couple of times, trying to act normal as he walked over, but he moved awkwardly, making it hard for me to ignore. A few steps later, he was blushing deeply. Sitting beside me, he avoided eye contact. I stared at his furry ears, my hands itching to touch them. Are you trying to seduce me? I've been drinking, but I'm not drunk. My face might be red, but I'm very sober. Ethan turned his head slightly. So, were you seduced? His voice was innocent, but the ear on top of his head wobbled a bit, probably not secured well. I quickly reached over to adjust it. Ethan faced me, visibly inexperienced, his cheeks and ears flushing all over. But his words were extremely seductive. He said, I won't do anything to you, but if you want to do something to me, I won't refuse. Oh my God, who could resist this? Swallowing hard, I said, I'm not the kind of person to take advantage of others. He nodded seriously, neither am I. We stared at each other, neither speaking. My hand stayed on his furry ear, squeezing it unconsciously. Ethan's gaze was burning hot. The air felt charged. Somehow, my hand ended up on Ethan's chest. Feeling the firm muscles beneath the fabric, my face turned even hotter. I looked at his outfit. Is the skirt comfortable? God, I really like this. I had asked Ken to wear something like this before, but he refused, saying it wasn't appropriate for a man. Gazing at Ethan's face, I thought, having experienced diverse cultures, he truly was more open-minded. Feeling embarrassed under my gaze, Ethan turned away. It's okay. His face was intensely red. What's underneath the skirt? I asked, knowingly teasing. Ethan's jaw muscles tightened instantly, and he tried hard to control himself. He grabbed my hand, the veins on the back of his hand bulging, but he restrained himself from hurting me. He was nervous, shy even. He lowered his voice and whispered, wanna know? I stared at his profile, watching his Adam's apple move up and down. He started to pull my hand downward. Ethan, he stopped abruptly, his whole body stiffened. I lifted my other hand and turned his head toward me. Look at me. Ethan's eyes were tense, a mix of urgency and a hint of hope. Maybe it was the alcohol kicking in. Maybe my tolerance had gotten worse. I actually felt a little tipsy. Wrapped in this ambiguous atmosphere, I felt lightheaded. Ethan, can I kiss you without taking responsibility? I stared at his red lips, eager. His lips parted. No. Oh, I lowered my head, disappointed. At that moment, a slender hand grabbed my chin, lifting my face up. Ethan continued, but I can take responsibility. He leaned in to kiss me. The moment our lips met, my mind exploded with fireworks. His kiss was gentle, teasing, but I wanted more. I raised my hand to wrap around Ethan's neck, initiating a deeper kiss. He held me tightly, as if merging me into his very bones. The moonlight outside was hazy, Ethan's clothes disheveled as he restrained my hands. That's enough, Molly. His voice was hoarse beyond belief. I looked up, confused. I don't want just a one-night stand with you. He kissed my forehead softly. I want all of you. Be good, go to sleep. He stood up and left swiftly, and I was left hanging, full of frustration, staring at the closed door. I angrily muttered, Ethan, you tease. I heard a low chuckle from the other side of the door. The next morning, I got up angrily, ready to leave. Ethan, shirtless, came over to block me. Eat breakfast before you go, please, miss. Seeing the kiss marks on his body made me even angrier. Don't you have any clothes? You think walking around like this looks good? Ethan looked innocent. Your handiwork. As we bickered, I opened the door. Standing there was a hunched-over figure. Ethan and I both froze. Ethan's smile vanished. He stepped in front of me. Who's this? The figure slowly lifted his head, revealing a face I knew all too well. Ken. He actually found me. Ken, unshaven and with bloodshot eyes, looked past Ethan, staring directly at me. His eyes filled with the joy of finding something lost. Molly, I've been looking for you for half a month. Where did you go? I waited for you at your house all night, but you never came back. Molly, do you not want me anymore? Why did you leave without a word? His gaze fell to my abdomen, our baby. Ken looked nothing like his usual composed self, now exuding a familiar dark and obsessive aura. It reminded me of what System had said about him going dark. It made me fearful. You could find out I went to the hospital. So you should know I'm not pregnant. I know you were angry. I'm sorry, Molly. Ken stepped forward, agitated, but was blocked by Ethan. Ken glared at Ethan, his eyes then landing on the kiss marks on Ethan, making his chest heave violently. Just half a month, Molly, and you too. His expression made it seem like I had betrayed him. I couldn't help but laugh coldly, grabbing Ethan's arm. That's right, just half a month, not like your 10 years. Ken remembered something, his face turning pale, panic visibly spreading. Molly, it's not like that. I interrupted. You're just my ex, Ken. We have nothing between us. Ken was completely stunned. It was like his deepest secret had been exposed. With a bang, I shut the door. My feelings were a chaotic mess. Ethan didn't say anything, giving me space to be alone. He went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Through the peephole, I saw Ken standing outside for a long time, until he took a call, and then he slowly turned to leave. Ethan finished cooking, and as he served me, he said, "Ken seems a bit unhinged. For safety's sake, stay here for now." I grumbled, "Then stop teasing me." To my surprise, Ethan shook his head. "No can do." "Ethan," he chuckled, all right, just joking." Then his face turned serious. "Seeing Ken like that, he won't give up until he takes you back. If this goes on, who knows what irrational things he might do. You have a plan?" Ethan nodded. "Go back home and marry me." I paused. "Are you serious?" Ethan elaborated. "Your relationship with him isn't respectable. If there's a scandal, your family's reputation would be at risk, especially your grandfather. He's old and wouldn't take it well, so you'd have to suppress it. The surest way is to marry me and completely cut off Ken's hopes." I pursed my lips, frowning. Ethan made sense, but I had one doubt. Ken's dark turn. Where were the main characters? I stood up. "I need some time alone." Back in the room, I secretly called out to System. Since our last Clear the Air talk, System hadn't appeared or reported on Ken. System quickly responded. "Host, what's up?" I asked. Ken turned dark. Shouldn't he be targeting the main characters? Why did he come for me? Hold on, let me check recent events. A few minutes later, System found that in the past 2 weeks, Ken was around the female lead, being considerate. Then the male lead showed up and reconciled with the female lead, making up. So his dark turn is, Ken inherently has a gloomy personality. Right, he's naturally dark. So he came for me just because the main characters reconciled, leaving him alone, and he remembered me. In theory, yes, you call this being a backup. Fuck. In anger, I cursed. Ethan's worried voice came from the door. "Molly, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Host, stay civilized. Ken's original ending was to die saving the heroine. The system wants me to save him, because he's had a miserable life, and never knew love. They want me to change his ending and let him live happily." I lowered my voice. "When does Ken die?" "In a few years. So, in these few years, I might not have any peace. I have to get rid of Ken." Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Ethan was anxiously stretching his neck, and upon seeing me open the door, he sighed in relief. "We can talk things out. Don't just bottle up your anger." I got straight to the point. "Let's get engaged. During the engagement, I'll slowly accept you. I'll try my best to fall in love with you, so you don't feel shortchanged." Ethan paused for a moment, then suddenly smiled and gently pinched my cheek. "You don't have to force yourself." I shook my head. "I'm not forcing myself. I'm forcing you." I was using him to get rid of Ken, exploiting his feelings for me. It wasn't fair to him. Just as I was about to apologize, Ethan pressed his finger to my lips. He looked at me tenderly and said, word by word, with deep affection, "I'm happy to do it." After making up our minds, we set off to return home. Ken got the news and rushed back too, but he was a day late. The news of my engagement to Ethan was already widely known. My parents didn't say much and earnestly took care of the engagement arrangements. I don't know how Ethan convinced his family, but I haven't seen him in the past 2 days. Ken was the first to find me, pulling me into a secluded corner and questioning me in a low voice. "Molly, what are you doing? You're getting engaged to Ethan. What about me?" I stayed calm. "When you were doing everything for Wendy, did you ever think about me?" Ken's face tightened, then he explained, "There's nothing between us, believe me, Molly. Wendy grew up with me. When my dad got drunk, he'd beat me, and my mom was too weak to resist. When I was about to be beaten to death, she came and gave me food. She used her saved pocket money to buy me medicine. I just wanted to repay her. Do you dare say you never liked her?" Ken gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. "I liked her. She was like a light in my dark childhood. But, the one I love is you, Molly. I can tell the difference." I shook my head. "No, in some ways, you see me as her." Ken's eyes widened. Before he could speak, I continued, "Because we were both good to you, but she's more unforgettable. Can you say you've never looked for her shadow in me?" Ken's lips moved, but he said nothing. I chuckled. "If you could really tell the difference, why can't you let go? Why couldn't you openly acknowledge our relationship? If you could really tell the difference, why am I only finding out about her now? Why have you been secretly in touch with her behind my back? If you could really tell the difference, why did you only come to me after she reconciled with her ex-husband?" I pushed him away. "Ken, I didn't wrong you. On the contrary, much of your success is because of me. Don't play the victim. It's really disgusting." I walked past Ken and left. During dinner, the maids mentioned that after I finished talking to Ken, he stood there for a long time, his eyes red. I heard it and felt nothing. I hadn't seen Ethan for 2 days, and I thought of going to his house. I was still a bit worried. After all, a few people knew about Ken and me. Ethan's family had once sent him abroad over a mere rumor. Now that they agreed to the engagement, who knows what price Ethan paid. When I arrived at Ethan's house, his mom greeted me. "Molly, why didn't you let me know you were coming? I could have prepared some tea and snacks." "No need, Auntie. I haven't been able to reach Ethan these days. I was worried, so I thought I'd come see what he's up to." She laughed softly. "You young people really know how to play. Ethan's been busy at his dad's company these days. He hasn't been home. He probably should have let you know." "I see." Looking at her pinky, I noticed there was some dried blood. There were rumors that Ethan's family had strict rules, and violators would be whipped. "Auntie, where's Ethan's room? Can I see it?" She hesitated for a moment. "That boy doesn't let us in his room. Could you wait until next time and have him show you?" "All right. I'll go see him at the company." As she escorted me out, she smiled and said to come again soon. Watching through the rearview mirror as she went back inside, I instructed the driver to turn around. Back at Ethan's house, I told the maids not to report my presence as I quietly went upstairs. Now that I was engaged to Ethan, I was half their master, and they had to be cautious. Upstairs, I found Ethan's room. The door was ajar, and Ethan's cries came from inside. "Mom, go easy, it hurts. It really hurts." His mom's voice was a mix of caring and frustration. "If you knew it would hurt, why did you talk back to your father?" Ethan chuckled, trying to change the subject. "Mom, did Molly suspect anything?" "No, your mother sweet-talked her into leaving." "I don't get it. Why would you go against Dad, face the family rules, just to marry Molly?" "Mom, you don't understand. I've waited years for her. I've waited so long for her to be with me. I have to marry her quickly." His mom sighed. "But have you thought about what could happen if Molly's history with Ken comes out? How much impact it will have on the family? He's not even a real son. We could just disown him." "Mom, don't judge Molly because of this. She's just young and naive. What Ken did wasn't right. He was with her for 3 years, and after seeing his first love, he claimed they were just uncle and niece. Screw that uncle-niece nonsense." 10. I pushed open the door and saw Ethan lying face down on the bed, with deep whip marks on his back, some even down to the bone. His mom was tenderly applying medicine to his wounds. When Ethan got a bit agitated, his mom pushed his shoulder down without hesitation. "Don't move." Ethan gritted his teeth in pain. It wasn't until I walked up to them that they noticed me. Ethan's first reaction was to grab the blanket beside him and cover his back, which tugged at his wounds, making him break out in a sweat from the pain. His mom showed a flash of anger, but quickly suppressed it. "Sorry, Auntie." She looked at me with dissatisfaction, but didn't scold me. In contrast, Ethan pretended to be relaxed and said, "Why are you barging into my room? Aren't you ashamed?" His mom handed me the medicine, glanced at Ethan who was frantically making faces at her, and then turned and left, kindly closing the door behind her. I held the medicine, sat at the edge of the bed, and silently reached to pull the blanket away. Ethan clutched it tightly. "The medicine's almost done, it's fine. Turn around and let me change my clothes, then we'll." Ethan's voice trailed off. He sat up in a hurry. "Don't cry. Please don't cry." I sniffled, and as soon as I started to speak, I couldn't keep the sobs at bay. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he would do this to you. Don't cry. Don't cry. It's just some surface wounds," Ethan said tenderly while wiping away my tears. "Ethan, I'm really not worth it. I was the one chasing Ken. I was the one being clingy. He even told me it wouldn't work, and I didn't listen. It's all my fault." Ethan interrupted. "There's nothing wrong with liking someone." "Huh?" I stared at him blankly. He smiled gently. "If liking someone was purely logical, would it really be called liking?" He was talking about me, and about himself. After that, I went to Ethan's house every day to take care of him. Eventually, his mom couldn't stand it anymore. With a wave of her hand, she told Ethan to go back to his apartment, and I followed him there. Ethan watched me bustling around the apartment and suddenly asked, "Molly, are you doing this out of guilt, or because you're touched?" I turned to look at him. Without waiting for my response, he added, "I don't want your guilt, or your gratitude. I want you to like me." His eyes burned with intensity, leaving me nowhere to hide. I need time." "Sure, I'll give you time." That night, I was about to apply medicine on Ethan's wounds. His injuries had scabbed over but still couldn't get wet. But he made an unreasonable request. "I want to take a shower, but I can't see my back. Can you help?" I immediately refused. "No way." Ethan's eyebrows drooped. "All right, I'll wash myself. It's not a big deal if the wounds get wet and infected." Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but feel soft-hearted. I knew he was doing it on purpose, but I still fell for it. In the bathroom, Ethan stood almost naked in front of me, only wearing his underwear. My hand holding the shower head shook, and I didn't know where to look. Ethan chuckled lightly. Why are you shy? It's not like you're an 18-year-old girl. I glared at him. I am not. It's just a shower, it'll be quick. I kept trying to convince myself. I foamed up the shower sponge and applied it to Ethan's body, trying hard to ignore his penetrating gaze. The bathroom filled with steam, and all we could hear was the water and our breathing. I carefully avoided letting water touch Ethan's back, but he didn't seem satisfied with just standing there, stepping closer to me. What are you doing? Ethan softly replied, we're about to get engaged, Molly. We're already engaged. And then, don't come any closer. I was backed up against the wall, with nowhere else to go. Ethan's expression darkened. Your clothes are wet. Helping him shower meant I had inevitably gotten wet, but I didn't expect to get this drenched. It was almost see-through. Ethan tilted my chin up, and his warm kiss landed on me. Our bodies pressed tightly together, with no gaps. My hands fumbled nervously, trying to avoid his wounded back, but accidentally pulling at the only piece of clothing he had. Ethan tensed up, his kiss becoming fiercer. Between breaths, I heard him say, don't rush. Before I could argue, his lips sealed mine again. In the end, both of us were drenched, but fortunately, his back didn't get wet. I stayed at Ethan's place for a while, until his wounds healed. He became more adept at kissing me. The day of our engagement was drawing nearer. My mom said the custom-made gowns were ready, so she dragged us along to try them on. Unexpectedly, we ran into Wendy. She was dressed in a pure white wedding gown, and her daughter wore a mini version of it. The man beside them had deep eyes and an elegant demeanor. That must be the male lead. I quietly asked the system, what are they doing? The female lead used to be a kept woman with the male lead, and they later registered their marriage, but never held a wedding. Now they are having a ceremony. Ken is going to crash the wedding. Wow, as long as he doesn't come looking for me. Wendy saw me too, and smiled and nodded from a distance. I smiled back. Unexpectedly, the male lead suddenly grabbed her by the chin, saying angrily, she's Ken's niece. Do you know her? What? You haven't cut ties with Ken? Wendy's eyes instantly filled with tears. It's not like that. Then how do you know her? The male lead's sharp gaze shot towards me. I quickly turned around, my heart pounding wildly. Ethan walked out in his new clothes, seeing my expression, and asked concernedly, what's up? I shook my head and lowered my voice. Ran into some nutcases. No, 3 of them. With Ken, it's 3. I need to stay far away from those crazy people. So, I quickly dragged my mom and Ethan home. Never expected Ken to be at my place. He was sitting on the sofa, and my dad didn't look too happy. When he saw me come in, Ken immediately stood up and pointed to the gift on the table. Molly, here's a gift for you. He acted normal, so I just nodded. Open it, see if you like it. Under their watchful eyes, I reluctantly opened the gift box, but what was inside made me freeze, feeling like I fell into an ice pit. Besides the mistaken pregnancy test result, there were all the gifts and intimate items from when Ken and I were together. My dad was furious and slapped Ken. Are you crazy? Do you want to ruin Molly? My mom had someone take everything out and throw it away. Ethan held me protectively and glared at Ken. What do you think you're doing? Ken watched my reaction the whole time, as if he was expecting something. Bro, why would I want to ruin Molly? I love her too much. Molly, you always wanted to go public. Can we go public now? It was my fault I didn't tell you about Wendy before. Don't get engaged to someone just to spite me. Molly, we can still be like we used to be. My eyes mechanically moved to Ken's face. Wendy's getting married, so you want to marry me to upset her? Ken's voice suddenly got louder. It's got nothing to do with her. Molly, why can't you believe I love you? He came over to grab me, but Ethan punched him. Look clearly, she's my fiancé. Ken wiped the blood from his mouth and sneered. Fiancé, do those words not make you feel guilty? Does she like you? She's always liked chasing me. You invited her to go abroad, but she rejected you in a heartbeat when I called out to her. Don't you know how much I matter to her? We're just having some issues now. Do you really think you have a chance? Ethan didn't get mad. Instead, he laughed. If you're so sure, why did you bring all this stuff here and make a scene? Ken gritted his teeth. Ethan, their eyes met in midair, sparks flying. At that moment, I tugged at Ethan's arm. I had listened long enough. I looked at Ken, mocking him. What you're proud of is that I chased after you and treated you well. But, I stepped forward. Molly, Ethan said nervously, pulling me back. But what? Ken frowned. I smiled brightly. I treated you well because the system told me to. Warning, warning. The host must not reveal the system's existence. Must not reveal the system's existence. Urgent alarms and static sounds buzzed in my head. Warning, warning. The host will be punished with electric shocks. I ignored it, speaking each word clearly and forcefully. The system told me to. None of it was my intention. The system saw your life full of suffering and no one loving you. So it made me love you and save you. But if I knew you were such a fickle person, I would have never agreed. At the same time, sharp pain surged through my body. I stiffened, then started convulsing. Ethan was terrified. Molly, what's happening to you? My parents hurriedly called for an ambulance. Ken stared at me, thinking it was laughable. What system? You don't need to make up such ridiculous things to push me away. I weakly said, the system doesn't let me talk about it, or it punishes me with electric shocks. Seeing my pale face, Ken started to waver. No, that's impossible. It's all lies. I forced myself to give him one last blow. If it wasn't for the system's orders, I wouldn't even look at you. Though it wasn't forced, it hurt more that way. After saying that, I fell unconscious. This move, harming the enemy mightily, but also myself. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Ethan was sleeping by my bedside, the morning's first light casting over his face like a painting. Ethan, I raised my hand to nudge him. Ethan woke up, dark circles under his eyes, bloodshot veins covering his eyes. You finally woke up. You scared me to death. We came to the hospital, found nothing wrong, but you wouldn't wake up. You really scared me to death. He held my hand and kissed it, full of lingering fear. I asked, what about Ken? How did he react after I passed out? Ethan froze, then looked lost and bitter. Seeing this, I quickly explained, I don't still care about him. I just can't stand him bragging about my kindness everywhere. So out of spite, I used this move that harms both sides. If he wasn't crying and regretting it a lot, wouldn't this be all for nothing? Now it was Ethan's turn to be shocked. So the system, it's real, just can't be revealed. If I talk about it, I get punished. The system then spoke dryly. So you knew all along. Do you know how much effort I put into not electrocute you to death? I was startled. You planned to electrocute me to death. Since Ethan already knew about the system, I saw no need to hide it. The system furiously said, we're all top secret. Do you understand? Disclosing it leads to severe punishment. Lucky for you, I'm lenient and only gave a symbolic shock. Are you sure? I passed out, but this showed how terrifying the system's punishment was. Ethan looked at me talking to myself. After his initial panic, he accepted it calmly. He asked nervously, so now that you're having this issue with Ken, will you still get shocked? I shook my head. No, the task isn't mandatory. When I saw Ken and Wendy messing with each other, I gave up on the task. Ethan stroked my hair and sighed with relief. That's good. As you wished. Ken is now in a lot of pain, constantly doubting himself. And because of this, he's been kicked out of Molly's household. He has nothing to do with Molly anymore. But with his connections over the years, he'll probably get back on his feet. He could be big trouble in the future. Everything seemed to return to square one. Hearing this, I frowned. I don't understand. What was the point of making me save him in the first place? The system kindly explained to me. Ultimately, saving him means making him fall in love with you so he doesn't die from fighting with the main characters. But that's his own destiny. Involving you isn't fair either. So the task isn't mandatory. Now that you've given up, he'll go back to the original storyline, following the original ending. Hearing this, I frowned even deeper. Why did saving him have to mean making him love me? What if I love him? Wasn't there another way? Unless you started from when he was a baby. Who could resist falling in love with a bond like that? Yeah, who could resist? I'm a living example. After being discharged from the hospital, it was time for my engagement to Ethan. I could feel he had something on his mind. Coincidentally, my engagement day and Wendy's wedding were on the same day. And today, Ken was going to crash the wedding. Because of this, the misunderstandings between the main characters will worsen, and Ken will officially go to war with the main character. But I never expected Ken to show up at my engagement party instead of Wendy's wedding. He brought a box as a gift for my engagement. Molly, my dear niece, happy engagement. He was smiling, but it was so forced. My parents called security to kick him out. Ethan stayed by my side, not letting Ken get close. Ken didn't resist. During the pushing and shoving, the box fell to the ground. A pair of exquisite crystal shoes fell out, with the heels damaged. Someone quickly picked up the shoes and threw them in the trash. I once dreamed of marrying Ken, saying I'd have the most beautiful crystal shoes in the world as my wedding shoes. He just smiled at that time. Glancing at the trash can, I turned back and saw Ethan looking distracted. What's wrong? Ethan snapped out of it and smiled. Nothing. The engagement party continued. In the middle, news came that Ken had crashed the wedding. He took Wendy away, and the main character was furious, launching a full-scale search for Ken. I learned more about it later, but it generally followed his original path. Finally, the engagement party ended. After the crowd dispersed, Ethan hugged me tightly, his voice muffled. Molly, tell me, if there was no system, if you didn't need to save Ken, would we have been together sooner? I thought about it. Probably not. Ethan immediately let go of me. Why not? You liked me, but never said anything. How would I know? Besides, it's not too late now. Ethan grabbed my hand and pulled me into the room. I've prepared several sets of clothes. This time, I won't leave you hanging. That's not what I meant. But Ethan clearly wasn't listening. That night, under the hazy moonlight, Ethan pushed me onto the bed. I tugged at the chain in my hand and gasped, "Are you a dog or what?" Ethan chuckled and barked softly. "Save your strength, miss. You'll need it later." Finally, with a choked voice, Ethan asked me, "Molly, do I have a place in your heart now?" Thinking about everything that had happened, I couldn't help but smile. "Ethan, I'm not the type to face difficulties. If one day you don't love me anymore, I'll stay far away from you." His eyes sparkled. "That day will never come. And besides, I like facing difficulties." The last sentence had a deep meaning. As the moon set and the sun rose, Ethan finally rested contentedly, holding me. I heard him whisper in my ear, "Molly, I love you."